On a cold morning at Windsor, the palace gates closed quietly, with no trumpets, no cameras, no balcony waves. Yet behind those iron bars, something extraordinary unfolded. Princess Anne, the monarch's most disciplined daughter, was about to surrender a title no royal woman had ever relinquished in living memory. And the woman standing opposite her, Catherine, was not expecting what came next. It was meant to be a simple exchange of words, a ceremonial passage of duty, yet beneath the silence lingered something unspoken, an emotion neither of them could hide. It wasn't joy. It wasn't pride. It was the unmistakable weight of history pressing down on both women as the kingdom slept, unaware that its power was shifting in secret. The ceremony itself was unlike anything the monarchy had seen. No royal press office announcement, no heraldic banners, only the echo of quiet footsteps along marble floors and the low rustle of ancient robes. Princess Anne entered with two aides, both sworn to secrecy, carrying a small velvet case sealed with a royal insignia. It wasn't the crown or the orb or any relic known to the public. This was different. This was personal. Inside, nestled in deep crimson lining, lay the emblem of an honor passed only once per generation, a title bound not by blood, but by virtue. Anne had sworn long ago it would die with her. Yet today, that vow was about to be broken. Catherine arrived minutes later, summoned by the Queen's private secretary under the guise of a confidential briefing. Even she didn't know why. As she entered the candle-lit hall, her composure faltered for the first time in years. There was something unnerving about the sight before her. Anne, rigid, expressionless, standing as if she were preparing for confession. No words of welcome, no trace of warmth, just duty, carved in marble. When Anne extended her hand, Catherine hesitated, as though she sensed that this was no honor, but a burden disguised as one. Those few present would later whisper about that hesitation. Some said it was humility, others, fear. But the truth lay somewhere between. Catherine understood instinctively that what she was being offered came with strings older than the throne itself. The royal aides bowed, exchanged nods, and withdrew, leaving the two women alone. A private oath was spoken, a line Anne recited from memory, her voice trembling only once. To hold this not in pride, but in burden, to serve, not to rule. What the world would later call a gift was, in truth, a transfer of power and defiance. The king was nowhere to be seen. His absence was no coincidence. It was a protest. The act had been orchestrated quietly, without royal approval, making it as dangerous as it was symbolic. Some insiders claimed it was Anne's rebellion, others that it was her final act of loyalty to the crown, or perhaps to the woman she had once underestimated. Outside the palace, the world went on as usual. Reporters camped along the gates, unaware they were missing the most consequential royal exchange of the decade. Inside, Catherine stood motionless, clutching the insignia that now marked her as the bearer of something far greater than herself. She wanted to ask why, but Anne's eyes gave no answer. Only the faintest tremor of resignation crossed her features, a hint that this was not a choice freely made, but one demanded by unseen forces. By the time the two women parted, a strange quiet had fallen over Windsor. Even the air seemed charged, as if the walls themselves recognized what had transpired. A title once guarded fiercely by the most unwavering royal was now in the possession of an outsider turned duchess. It was meant to symbolize trust, yet behind every gesture of trust in the monarchy lies a shadow of suspicion, consequence, legacy. Hours later, as Catherine's car disappeared into the mist, Anne remained standing in that same hall, staring at the empty velvet case. The aides reappeared, awaiting instruction, but she dismissed them with a simple nod. Her eyes, steady yet haunted, lingered on the faint imprint left inside the box. She whispered something only the walls could hear, a name, perhaps, or a warning. The transfer had been done. The vow had been broken. But the cost of this silent coronation was only beginning to unfold. The monarchy would soon face questions it could not answer. And as word of the event crept through palace corridors, a storm was already gathering beyond those stone walls. But to understand why this moment shook the monarchy, one must go back to the silent vow Princess Anne made decades ago, and the secrets she buried with it. Long before Catherine ever set foot inside the palace, Princess Anne had carved her destiny in steel. She was the daughter who never yielded, the sister who never begged, the royal who carried honor like armor. But beneath her stoic surface, Anne carried a hidden promise, one forged during her mother's reign, whispered only once, and sworn in silence. The title she held would die with her, or so she thought. For Anne, this vow was more than a promise. It was her lifeline in a family where loyalty was currency and silence was survival. Every decision, every duty, every public appearance was bound by that silent oath, the one that kept her from breaking, but also from feeling. Anne's story began not in privilege, but in shadow. As Queen Elizabeth's only daughter, she was the invisible heir royal by blood, yet overlooked by destiny. Her brother Charles was the future. Anne was the constant reminder of duty without power. But rather than resent her position, she shaped it into something unshakable. Where others sought comfort, she sought purpose. Where they sought admiration, she sought respect. And when the Queen bestowed upon her a title unlike any other one that symbolized not status, but sacrifice, Anne understood what it meant. It was never meant to elevate her, it was meant to bind her. She accepted it not with joy, but with the kind of solemn pride that turns flesh into stone. As the years unfolded, Anne became known as the monarchy's iron heart, unwavering, incorruptible, the embodiment of discipline. Yet, even iron can rust from within. Behind closed doors, she carried the weight of isolation. Her marriage to Mark Phillips, once seen as a break from royal rigidity, became another chain of compromise. He wanted freedom, she wanted structure. He saw tradition as a burden, she saw it as a legacy. When whispers reached her that Mark had encouraged a loosening of royal protocol for convenience's sake, she did not argue, she froze. Her silence was her shield. To her, love was fleeting, but duty was eternal. And when she looked upon the crest of her title, the one that bore the Queen's seal and her own initials, she swore that no one unworthy would ever bear it again. That vow was made on a rainy night in Balmoral, just the two of them, mother and daughter, queen and soldier. Elizabeth's voice was quiet, steady, as she spoke of the responsibility that came with legacy. This title, she said, is not given, it is guarded. And Anne, with eyes full of unshed emotion, promised she would never allow it to fall into hands that did not understand its weight. It was not an oath of pride, but preservation. Yet promises made in the warmth of devotion often harden into burdens with time. As the modern age crept upon the royal family, Anne watched with growing unease. Flashbulbs replaced ceremony, tweets replaced speeches, appearances replaced principles. The younger royals, William, Catherine, and Harry, became the faces of a new monarchy Anne could not recognize. Their charm was effortless, their connection with the public undeniable. But to Anne, it felt dangerously close to performance. She had spent her life shielding the crown from spectacle. Now it was becoming the spectacle itself. Catherine, in particular, represented a paradox Anne could not reconcile. A commoner who had mastered royal grace, a woman adored not for her title, but for her humanity. It was everything Anne had never been allowed to be. She saw in Catherine both admiration and threat. The Duchess embodied the very qualities the modern monarchy demanded: warmth, empathy, and relatability. Yet, to Anne, these were not virtues, but vulnerabilities. She believed the monarchy survived on restraint, not emotion. And yet, as the world changed, Anne began to question whether her unbending discipline had made her a relic of an age that no longer existed. Behind her composed expression, Anne fought an internal war few could imagine. Every newspaper headline, every social media post, every photo of Catherine glowing beside William felt like a quiet erosion of the old order. But the vow still held her fast, that sacred promise to her mother that the title would remain hers until death. What she could not see then was that fate was already conspiring to test that promise in ways she could never predict. Because destiny has a cruel sense of irony. The woman Anne swore never to trust with royal legacy would one day embody the very strength Anne once claimed as her own. She was never meant to belong. A middle-class girl, a university sweetheart, a future queen molded by tabloids and whispers. Yet Catherine learned quickly. To survive the palace, one must smile in silence and strike in grace. Behind her calm composure, she was quietly reshaping royal femininity, something Anne both admired and feared. Catherine had entered a world where lineage outweighed love and tradition crushed individuality. But she didn't fight it. She adapted to it. Slowly, methodically, she mastered it, and in doing so, she became something the monarchy had not seen in decades. A woman who could command without speaking, win without demanding, and lead without ever stepping forward. From the outside, her rise seemed effortless, the fairy tale of a commoner turned duchess. But inside, the palace walls, it was anything but simple. Every gesture was studied, every word weighed. Catherine understood the power of restraint, the art of silence, the delicate dance between obedience and influence. She played by the rules until she learned to rewrite them. While others sought attention, she cultivated mystery. While others defended their place, she made hers undeniable. Her public image as the so-called People's Duchess wasn't born out of rebellion, but calculation. She knew empathy was the new currency of power, and as the world adored her for her compassion, the institution began to depend on it. But admiration didn't come without enemies. Inside the palace, whispers grew. Anne watched with a mixture of suspicion and intrigue. To her, Catherine was both a revelation and a warning. She saw in her the reflection of everything the monarchy was becoming, a polished, emotional, accessible version of royalty Anne had never been allowed to be. Their first private clash was subtle but unforgettable. Anne had questioned Catherine's decision to forego a traditional protocol during a public event, insisting that duty should never yield to popularity. Catherine's response was quiet, deliberate. Duty means little if the people stop believing in it. The words stung. For Anne, they bordered on blasphemy. For Catherine, they were survival. Yet beneath their differences, a fragile bond began to form, one built not on affection, but on understanding. Both women had learned to endure the loneliness of royal life in silence. Both had sacrificed fragments of themselves for the crown. And when scandal threatened to destabilize the monarchy, rumors, betrayals, and family fractures, it was Catherine who stood firm, defending Anne's integrity when few dared. In a private council, when the king questioned Anne's decision to act independently during a controversial charity initiative, Catherine spoke with quiet defiance. She did what was right. She said, not what was easy. Isn't that what loyalty to the crown truly means? The room fell silent. Even the king, known for his temper, said nothing. For the first time, Anne looked at Catherine not as an outsider, but as an equal. From that moment, their relationship shifted. Respect replaced rivalry. Where Anne saw rebellion, she began to see reflection. Catherine was living proof that strength could wear a smile, that composure could conceal power. Anne, who had built her legacy through discipline, saw in Catherine the evolution of that same discipline, transformed, softened, yet equally unbreakable. She didn't say it aloud, but she knew this woman, once dismissed as unworthy, might one day carry the weight she herself had borne for decades. Catherine, for her part, never sought approval. She knew the monarchy didn't reward emotion, it measured endurance. Every time she stood before flashing cameras, she thought not of beauty or grace, but of balance between her role as wife, mother, and future queen. The palace could strip away individuality, but it could not erase conviction. And behind the warmth of her smile lived an iron will, sharpened by years of quiet scrutiny. It was this quiet strength, this blend of empathy and endurance that caught Anne off guard. For years, she had believed no one could carry the burden of the monarchy with dignity and humanity. And yet, here she stood. Catherine, the woman from nowhere, the duchess who had become the beating heart of a centuries-old institution. And so, when Anne summoned her that morning, Catherine expected confrontation, not coronation. But the palace had other plans. The title Anne held wasn't just ceremonial. It was ancient, born from a royal oath older than the Commonwealth itself. Known only as the keeper of Street Helena's line, it bound its bearer to the protection of the monarch's moral legacy. To inherit it meant more than rank, it meant carrying the weight of judgment, the conscience of the crown. And Catherine had just been chosen. Few outside the royal circle even knew the title existed. Fewer still understood what it represented. But within the monarchy, it was whispered in private corridors, protected by centuries of silence. It wasn't power in the political sense, but power in its purest form, influence wrapped in moral authority. The title's origin traced back to Queen Victoria, not the benevolent matriarch history often remembered, but the shrewd strategist who saw the monarchy teetering on the edge of moral collapse. During her reign, Victoria created a secret order, an internal vow meant to preserve the line of conscience within the family. The one chosen as keeper would serve as the hidden guardian of royal integrity, the voice that could question the monarch, the soul tasked with ensuring the crown's purity of purpose. It was an invisible title with very real consequences. When others sought privilege, the keeper was burdened with guilt, silence, and watchfulness. It demanded incorruptibility, a standard so high that most feared even being considered for it. When Anne inherited the title, it wasn't by ceremony, but by necessity. The 1,990 seconds had nearly broken the royal family. Divorces, scandals, betrayals splashed across every front page. Amid the chaos, Anne stood immovable. She refused interviews, ignored gossip, and carried on with duty as if untouched by the storm. Behind that unyielding composure was the oath she had sworn to protect not just the image of the monarchy, but its soul. While others stumbled, Anne preserved dignity through discipline. To those who knew the truth, she wasn't simply Princess Anne. She was the keeper of Street Helena's line, the living firewall between the monarchy and moral ruin. Yet over time, even Anne began to see cracks form within the order she had sworn to uphold. The modern world no longer revered stoicism, it rewarded vulnerability. The press didn't honor sacrifice, it devoured it. And in Catherine, Anne recognized a contradiction. She couldn't ignore a woman who embodied integrity through warmth, not distance. It unsettled her at first. Catherine represented everything Anne had trained herself not to be: approachable, emotional, human. But as the years unfolded, Anne watched Catherine withstand pressure with quiet resilience, grace under relentless scrutiny. The tabloids called her perfect, but Anne saw something deeper, an unshakable composure disguised as humility. There was a legend whispered through generations that the title of keeper did not pass by decision, but by destiny. It chose its next bearer, manifesting when the family's moral compass shifted. Whether Anne believed it or not, she could not ignore the signs. Every crisis, every challenge, every moment of weakness in the royal family found its counterbalance in Catherine's strength. When the world questioned the monarchy's relevance, Catherine restored faith without even trying. And slowly, Anne's certainty began to waver. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of her vow loosen not from betrayal, but from recognition. Perhaps, after all these years, the title was never meant to die with her. Still, surrendering it came with a cost she was not prepared to admit. For Anne, the title had been her identity, her armor, her final link to her mother's reign. Letting it go meant letting go of herself. But she also understood something deeper. Catherine had already become what the title represented. Duty lived in her gestures, strength in her silence. And though Anne would never say it aloud, she knew that the moral heart of the monarchy had shifted from her hands to Catherine's. But the transfer of such power could not occur without sacrifice. And what Anne gave up that day came at a cost even Catherine could not foresee. When Anne removed the insignia from her collar, it wasn't just metal meeting air, it was history collapsing in silence. Witnesses said her hands trembled, though her face remained unreadable. What few knew was that the act of transfer required surrender not just of title, but of authority, of inheritance, even of unspoken influence. Anne was not just passing on honor, she was giving up her last tether to her mother's reign. In that moment, a lifetime of discipline cracked beneath the weight of finality. What looked like a ceremony was, in truth, the quiet unmaking of a woman whose entire existence had been defined by duty. Behind closed doors, Anne's composure fractured. For decades, she had been the embodiment of control, the royal who never faltered, never indulged emotion. Yet that afternoon, alone in her private chambers, her silence turned into grief. It wasn't the loss of status that broke her. It was the realization that her purpose had ended. She had lived for the monarchy, served it with every ounce of loyalty, and now she was no longer its conscience. For a woman like Anne, that was a death of its own kind, a death without ceremony, without mourning, without recognition. In the days that followed, her absence from council meetings went almost unnoticed by the public. But within the palace, it was deafening. Where her voice once carried authority and precision, there was now only hesitation. Her counsel, once sought and respected, began to fade into polite irrelevance. It was as though the transfer had taken more than her title. It had taken her voice. The corridors she once commanded now echoed with the voices of a newer generation, one she had protected but never quite understood. Catherine, in particular, became the centre of quiet fascination and quiet resentment. The same act that had bound Anne and Catherine in solemn trust had, paradoxically, set them on diverging paths, one descending into silence, the other rising into influence. Catherine, though honoured, carried the new title uneasily. In private, she confided her doubts to William, fearing that her acceptance had ignited a quiet rebellion within the family. "I didn't want to take it from her," she said softly. But the decision was beyond her control, and the crown, once in motion, did not reverse course. William, though proud of his wife, shared her unease. He understood the monarchy's fragile balance better than anyone. Every symbol, every gesture, every whisper carried weight, and this symbolic inheritance felt different, dangerous even. Whispers soon began circulating through the court. Some claimed the transfer had triggered an ancient clause hidden deep in royal charters, one that might affect Anne's estates, her privileges, even her ceremonial rank. Others murmured of tension between the king and his sister, suggesting that what had been done could not be undone without consequence. The narrative twisted itself like ivy through the palace walls. What had begun as a sacred act of loyalty was being repainted as betrayal. The king's advisors were alarmed. Could Anne's quiet rebellion and the handing over of a moral guardianship without royal consent be seen as defiance against the throne itself? By the time evening fell, the weight of speculation had grown unbearable. Servants reported hushed meetings behind closed doors, notes exchanged between royal secretaries, and an air of unease that clung to Windsor like fog. Catherine, once protected by her grace, now found herself the centre of a power storm she never intended to start. And Anne, watching from the shadows of her former life, understood the cost of what she had done. She had freed herself from duty, yes, but in doing so, she had set the monarchy ablaze with quiet suspicion. By sunset, the whispers had already begun. Within hours, the act of loyalty was recast as betrayal, and the palace was at war. The king's temper was legendary. When news reached him that Anne had transferred the title without consultation, courtiers described the palace atmosphere as electric and icy. Yet Queen Camilla's silence spoke louder than any reprimand. For behind the fury lay something darker: fear. The title Anne had passed carried constitutional weight, a secret clause linking it to succession, and now Catherine held it. The monarchy, long accustomed to control, had been blindsided from within. What should have been a moment of solemn continuity had become an act of quiet rebellion, and the man at the centre of it, the king himself, saw not loyalty, but a threat. Those who were present that morning would later whisper that the confrontation between the king and his sister was unlike anything they had ever witnessed. Anne entered his study without bowing, the first sign that this would not be a conversation of formality, but of truth. "You should have come to me," the king began, his voice steady but brittle. "It was my right to decide." Anne, ever unflinching, replied, "And it was my duty to act." The silence that followed was suffocating. For the first time in decades, the royal siblings stood not as representatives of the crown, but as adversaries divided by principle. Servants outside the door heard raised voices, the thud of a chair, and then nothing but the sound of retreating footsteps. When Anne finally left, her face was pale but composed. The kings remained unseen for the rest of the day. Queen Camilla, however, chose a different kind of weapon distance. She said nothing publicly, offered no comfort privately, and vanished from engagements that week, citing personal reflection. But those who understood her methods saw it for what it was: strategy. Camilla had built her influence not through confrontation, but through silence that spoke volumes. Her withdrawal sent a message for Catherine. It was a warning and a test, for if the Queen refused to stand beside her, Catherine would have to navigate the political storm alone. Inside the palace, advisors scrambled to contain the fallout. Drafts of an official statement were written and shredded. The same afternoon, one aide urged the king to clarify the title's ceremonial nature, to strip it of deeper meaning before the press uncovered the truth. But another advisor, older and shrewder, cautioned restraint. If you deny its power, he warned, you invite people to question why it matters. And so, indecision reigned. The monarchy had always thrived on mystery, but now that secrecy had turned against them. Meanwhile, Catherine chose silence of her own kind. She withdrew from public life for 3 days with no appearances, no statements, not even a photograph. The world noticed her absence. It was as if she had vanished into the very heart of the storm she had not created. Behind palace doors, she faced the impossible question: should she renounce the title to restore peace, or protect it to honor Anne's faith in her? Each option risked war, one with the king, the other with her conscience. Then came the leak. A confidential memo circulated among King's legal advisors found its way to a journalist. Its contents were explosive: an order from the king himself to review the legality of the transfer, a veiled attempt to reclaim authority. The revelation sent shockwaves through the court. It was no longer a family matter. It had become a constitutional scandal. The monarch was challenging the integrity of his own bloodline, and the woman at the center of it, Catherine, had no defense but dignity. Those closest to the king said the fury eventually gave way to something far more painful: doubt. He had spent a lifetime guarding the institution, yet here he was, watching it fracture from within. His sister had acted out of loyalty, his daughter-in-law out of principle, and he, the king, had responded with fear. The lines between duty and family had blurred until they were indistinguishable. But while the king wrestled with pride and paranoia, the world outside began to stir. For the first time in decades, the public saw cracks in the monarchy's unbreakable facade: emotion, division, humanity. And as whispers turned to headlines, one truth became undeniable. Something within the palace walls had changed forever. But as the monarchy fractured from within, the public sensed something extraordinary: a rare glimpse of truth leaking through the palace curtains. The world found out not through an announcement, but through a leak of a single photograph that shouldn't have existed. It showed Anne's hand on Catherine's shoulder, a ceremonial seal between them. Within hours, the image was everywhere. And suddenly, what was once an act of devotion became a narrative of betrayal, ambition, and power. The monarchy had lost control of its history. What was meant to remain a quiet gesture between two women of duty became the spark that ignited a global firestorm. The photo, elegant yet damning, traveled faster than any statement could contain it. Every headline screamed of secrecy, every talk show speculated on motive, and for the first time in decades, the crown, that ancient fortress of silence, found itself cornered by its own mystique. The source of the leak was never identified officially, but whispers pointed toward the Lord Chamberlain's office, the very department entrusted with safeguarding royal protocol. An anonymous staff member, it was said, had released the image along with a single cryptic line: "Power changes hands quietly, but its echo is never silent." The message hit harder than any scandal. It implied not honor, but usurpation, a hidden shift in influence the king had neither sanctioned nor foreseen. The monarchy's most sacred walls had been breached from within, and the betrayal was not merely external, It was systemic. What followed was chaos dressed as a ceremony. The press called it a hidden abdication. Commentators speculated whether Anne's transfer had constitutional implications or whether the act symbolized a shadow passing of authority. The public was enthralled. Talk of a silent succession dominated headlines. Some saw Anne's gesture as a noble handing of the torch to the next generation. Others, more cynical, painted her as a strategist cloaked in humility, the sister who had waited decades for her moment to rewrite royal hierarchy through symbolism, not decree. And yet, amid the noise, one truth became clear. Whatever the intention, the monarchy's illusion of unity had shattered. Old rivalries resurfaced like ghosts. Charles and Anne's siblings, bound by duty, divided by temperament, were once again on opposite sides of history. Their unspoken rivalry, long buried under royal protocol, now returned in whispers and insinuations. Tabloids, every absence at official events interpreted as quiet protest, dissected every exchange between them. The palace insisted on calm, yet even its statements carried tremors. The cracks were no longer invisible. For Catherine, the storm was suffocating. What had begun as an unwanted honor now made her the face of controversy. Inside the palace, allies grew cautious. Invitations slowed. Conversations stopped when she entered the room. Even William struggled to navigate the shifting loyalties, torn between supporting his wife and protecting his father's reign. Catherine bore it all with silent grace, but silence can be a double-edged sword. The more she withheld, the more the world projected its theories onto her, from secret ambition to reluctant martyrdom. And though Anne publicly defended her once, she soon retreated into the same guarded quiet that had defined her life. The sisterhood of understanding between them fractured under the weight of interpretation. Meanwhile, behind the palace gates, the institution tried desperately to smother the flames. Public relations advisors met in frantic sessions, urging a statement, a photograph, anything to reclaim the narrative. Yet every attempt to suppress the story only deepened the mystery. A royal aide was dismissed, another reassigned, but the questions remained unanswered. Why had the photograph been taken at all? Who authorized it? Why was it sealed until after the king's fury had subsided? The monarchy's silence, meant to convey dignity, instead resembled guilt. The image, frozen in time, yet alive in implication, became a symbol of everything the crown both feared and relied upon. The power of perception. And as the world debated whether Anne had acted out of love, rebellion, or strategy, one chilling possibility began to surface: that none of this was accidental. That the transfer, the leak, and the uproar were part of something older, something embedded within the monarchy's own forgotten traditions. Because beneath the headlines lay a deeper truth, one neither Anne nor Catherine could escape: the prophecy tied to the title itself. For centuries, royal archivists whispered of the prophecy of Street Helena's line. It claimed that when the bearer of the title passed it to one not born of royal blood, the crown would either fall or be reborn. Some dismissed it as a myth, others saw it as a warning. But for Anne and Catherine, it was no longer a tale, it was a ticking clock. The story of the prophecy had survived in fragments, buried deep within the vaults of the royal archives, guarded by silence and superstition. Few dared to speak of it, fewer still to believe it. Yet history had shown one undeniable pattern. Every time the title's balance was disturbed, the monarchy trembled. Its origins dated back to Queen Victoria's private order, a secret decree that connected the spiritual health of the monarchy to its moral line. According to old manuscripts, the keeper was chosen to safeguard not wealth or land, but something far more fragile: conscience. And within that duty lay the curse. If the title was ever handed to one outside royal birth, the family's divine legitimacy would be tested, and the heir who ruled next would face either divine favor or divine reckoning. The legend had endured because every few generations it seemed to manifest. Historians recalled King Edward's abdication and the chaos that followed a near fulfillment, they said, where love had almost broken the crown's sacred thread. Others whispered of the tragedy that befell a queen in the early 1900s who nearly passed the seal to her confidant, only to die days later under mysterious illness. To skeptics, coincidence. To believers, proof. Anne had grown up with that story carved into her memory like an unspoken scar. Her mother had warned her once, in a rare moment of candor, that some legacies are too heavy to share. It was that warning that had shaped Anne's vow never to relinquish the title. The prophecy terrified her, not because of superstition, but because of what it represented: the possibility that faith in the monarchy could be undone by choice, not chance. And now, she had done exactly what generations had feared. The keeper had broken the line, and the new bearer, Catherine, was no royal blood. Catherine, unaware of the full legend at first, only learned of its gravity after the leak. Late one evening, she wrote to the king not as daughter-in-law, not as subject, but as a woman desperate for clarity. The letter was never made public, but palace insiders spoke of its tone: humble, sorrowful, yet unflinching. She did not deny the act. She only pleaded that it be seen not as defiance, but as destiny. "If this title was born of integrity," she wrote, "then perhaps it chooses not by blood, but by heart." The king never replied, but those words would later echo across a nation searching for meaning in chaos. Outside the palace, fascination turned to frenzy. Newspapers revived the legend, documentaries speculated on omens, and royal watchers debated whether Catherine's rise was a sign of renewal or doom. The public, once skeptical of monarchy's mysticism, now found themselves entranced by it. The prophecy had escaped the archives and entered the modern age, reshaped by social media and speculation. Every appearance by Catherine was analysed like scripture, every silence interpreted as a sign. Anne, though silent, was haunted by what she had set in motion. Her decision had defied logic, but something deeper had driven her: an intuition that the monarchy was on the brink of collapse, and only transformation could save it. Yet transformation often comes with destruction, and as she watched the storm unfold, she began to wonder whether she had saved the institution she loved or condemned it to the very fate she feared. The prophecy was no longer legend. It was alive, breathing through rumour, history, and human consequence. And within its haunting truth lay a paradox the monarchy could not escape: that sometimes the only way to preserve the old is to let it die in the hands of the new. And when that reckoning came, it wasn't thunder or prophecy that struck first, it was Catherine herself, stepping into a role no queen had ever dared claim. When Catherine finally emerged from the palace, the world watched in silence. Gone was the timid duchess, gone was the anxious wife. In her place stood a woman reborn, adorned with the insignia of street, Helena, walking not beside power but within it. The torch had been passed, and with it, the monarchy's balance shifted forever. The image of her stepping into the light became an instant symbol not of rebellion, but of renewal. Her presence carried an authority that words could not define. This was no woman standing in the shadow of a throne. This was the embodiment of a new kind of royalty, one that demanded respect not through lineage, but through grace under fire. Her reappearance was deliberate, but not performative. Every detail, from the simplicity of her wardrobe to the measured stillness of her demeanour, spoke of quiet defiance. The press had expected contrition, a timid statement, perhaps even retreat. What they found instead was composure sharpened into strength. The Catherine, who once bowed to expectation, had transformed into someone who now commanded it. She had learned that in the world of monarchy, silence could be the most dangerous weapon of all. And as cameras clicked and headlines formed, the woman who had been accused of ambition simply stood still, her calm more powerful than any speech could have been. Inside the palace, the tension between the past and the present found its resolution not through words, but through a single moment of understanding. When Anne approached her unannounced, unguarded, the air seemed to change. No apologies were exchanged, no confessions made. Only a brief pause, a shared glance, and the faintest nod of recognition. It was not forgiveness they offered each other, but something deeper: acceptance. For Anne, it was acknowledgement that the legacy she had carried for so long had found its rightful heir, For Catherine, it was gratitude for a burden now shared, rather than stolen. The two women, bound by a secret act and an ancient title, had rewritten history not through force, but through faith. Even the king, who had resisted the change so fiercely, could not deny what was unfolding. At the next state event, when Catherine entered the grand hall wearing the insignia that once belonged to Anne, all eyes turned to him. The moment was small but seismic, a brief hesitation, then a nod, formal, restrained, but unmistakable. It was his reluctant acknowledgement, a silent surrender to inevitability. For the first time, he stood not as a sovereign defending power, but as a man witnessing transformation. His kingdom was changing before his eyes, shaped not by decree or tradition, but by two women who had dared to challenge its very foundation. Beyond the palace walls, the world responded with awe. Public sentiment shifted overnight. What had begun as a scandal had become inspiration. Commentators called her a queen before the crown. The phrase spread across every platform, echoing in headlines and conversations alike. To many, Catherine now symbolized a monarchy reborn as a fusion of strength and empathy, legacy and modernity. She had inherited a title steeped in mystery and turned it into a promise of renewal. And in doing so, she had done what no queen, no princess, no duchess before her had achieved, and she made the monarchy human again. But even in triumph, there lingered an ache, the kind that accompanies every great transition. The crown had survived another reckoning, but it would never be the same. The old world of silence, hierarchy, and obedience had given way to something unpredictable. In the reflection of that change stood two women who had carried its weight, each in her own way, one through sacrifice, the other through evolution. And as the palace lights dimmed that night, one truth remained. In the House of Kings, it was always the women who kept the flame alive.